so I'm doing this on my phone. So I was hoping I could.
Hello.
Perfect.
That
There
works.
you go.
Yeah.
Now here's the problem. This is gonna get tricky. I thought I could do. Okay, everything I planned. All right, hold on a minute. I gotta do a couple of things.
Okay.
Howdy to folks who are just coming in. And Carl, I'm turning this one over to you. You're the host.
Yes. Okay. And just wait a bit for everything to get adjusted on Faith's end there.
Okay, Faith is back. Hopefully this phone will not fall over. Is Britt there? Britt Julious?
I'm looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't see Britt as yet.
Okay.
No.
So that would be a slight issue.
Okay, can we give her like a minute or so? I mean, if she, I mean, I'll go ahead and start. Huh?
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm going to do an introduction, but we'll wait a couple of minutes for Britt to get here and for other people to join. There's always a bit of a lag.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and for folks who subsequently check out this series on YouTube, there's probably always going to be like a little bit at the beginning to just kind of fast forward through, which would be this part.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, here's Britt. I see Britt coming on now, so we're, I think, just about ready. And Kim is here, who's going to be doing the Q&A after Carl sets us all up.
Carl, do you want me to say a few words about the Q&A after you go, or?
Sure, we can do that. I was going to just say it in brief at the end of my intro, but if you have stuff you want to say, then that's cool.
All right, I think we are. Britt, can you hear us? Are you logged? Yep, I see. Okay, great. All right, Carl, take it away.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Carl Wilson, and welcome to the second installment in the Popular Music Books in Process series. This is a collaboration between the Journal of Popular Music Studies, IASPM US, and the Pop Conference, running every Tuesday at this time to the end of the year. I'd like to thank Eric Weisfeld for launching the idea and Kimberly Mack for joining me and helping Eric organize it. Last week we had a great session with Shauna Redmond and Gus Stadler talking about their books about Paul Robeson and Woody Guthrie, respectively. And next week, July 7th, we'll have R.J. Smith discussing his book in progress about Chuck Berry called You Never Can Tell. But this week, we're excited to talk D'Angelo with author Faith Pennick, who has a new book in the 33 and the Third series on Voodoo, D'Angelo's album from 2000. Faith is a Chicago-born, Los Angeles-based writer and filmmaker whose films have aired on US TV and screened at festivals around the world. She's currently in development with her narrative feature debut, Double Effect. And she wants to focus today on how D'Angelo tackles and embraces Black masculinity in sound and words, while simultaneously expressing vulnerability, and talk too about the way that that kind of vulnerability sounds or doesn't sound in present day R&B and hip hop. She's going to be joined in that conversation by Chicago's Britt Julious, a writer, editor, essayist, and storyteller for the New York Times, Vogue, Esquire, ELLE, Women's Health, and others. Britt writes a weekly column for the Chicago Tribune and serves as the editorial director of Cancer Wellness magazine and previously edited for Vice's THUMP. After this discussion, there'll be a Q&A, which Kim Mack is going to conduct. Kim, do you want to introduce a little bit how that's going to work?
Yes, I do. So I would just request that everybody put your questions in the chat. So yeah, don't worry about raising your hand. Just put your questions in the chat, and I will go through the chat and go through the questions at the end. And we hope to have, I hope, at least 20 minutes or so of Q&A at the end.
Great, thanks, Kim. Yeah, and you can just put those in the chat as you think of them as things go, and Kim will call on you afterwards, so that way you can note down thoughts as you have them. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Faith and Britt, give them a warm round of quiet approval.
Awesome. Faith, I guess, you know, we're going to be talking specifically about Devil's Pie, but if you could maybe just, you know, talk to us a little bit about, you know, your book and why you were really interested in writing specifically about voodoo.
Faith, you're muted.
I thought I unmuted. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Technology, it's too much. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. Hi. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here talking to all of you. I also would like to thank Britt for joining me on this. This was actually, we were going to do something like this at a bookstore in Chicago in April. And of course, COVID-19 burned all that down to the ground. So I'm glad we can at least do this sort of, you know, more focused talk specifically around Devil's Pie. To answer Britt's question, Voodoo basically is my all-time favorite album. When it first came out in 2000, I was basically blown away by it, overwhelmed by it. And also I was not a huge, like, hardcore D'Angelo fan at the time. I liked Brown Sugar. I thought it was a good album, but you know, a lot of my friends at the time were like, oh my God, D'Angelo, he's the savior of soul music. And I was like, okay, if you say so. I mean, he's great, but Voodoo really just blew my mind. And I know that said a lot. It almost becomes trite to say something like that, but I just thought it was something that I'd never heard before. I think it was something that, you know, just sonically, but also lyrically and emotionally, I just thought, wow. I mean, and also understand that D'Angelo was like in his early 20s when he recorded this album. And I just kept thinking, how can someone that young make an album so sublime? I mean, I was just completely just knocked off. It just knocked my socks off. So fast forward to 2016, I'm on vacation with my sister in Mexico, and my sister is the one that really turned me on to the 33 1/3 book series. And she was actually talking about a book that she had, I won't say which one, an album that she's wanted to write a 33 1/3 book about for a long time. And she just turned to me and said, you know what, you should write a book about voodoo. You should pitch Voodoo to 33 1/3. And I was like, you know, so it's like, wow, you know. So I said, okay, you know, challenge accepted, and, you know, pitched it to 33 1/3. And I don't know if Gayle King is on here yet, but Gayle King wrote me back the following spring. This was the summer of 2016. And then that spring after that, in 2017, Gayle King wrote me, I'm sorry, Gayle Wald, my apologies, Gayle Wald at George Washington University wrote me back and said, hey, we want to publish your book. We liked your proposal and we want to publish it. And I was like, for real? Because I mean, I really just sort of pitched it on a lark. I really wasn't expecting anything, you know, as far as, you know, I almost expected them to say no. So when they said yes, when Gayle wrote me back, and I was just like, holy crap. So, and now we have the book. We have Voodoo. Voodoo is here. So I wanted to talk specifically about Devil's Pie. I'm not going to talk about the entire album. I wanted to focus on Devil's Pie specifically as it relates to the expression of Black masculinity and vulnerability. Devil's Pie is a song that was not written for D'Angelo specifically. DJ Premier, one half of the seminal hip hop group Gang Starr, played a temp track for D'Angelo that another artist, a rapper named Cannabis turned down. D'Angelo heard it, he loved it, and wrote his own lyrics for the song. And the lyrics have been forwarded to you, so you should have them. If for some reason you don't, feel free to look them up online, or if you have the Voodoo album, you know, refer to the album liner or the CD booklet. And I was going to play a snippet of the song, but because this is being recorded and it's going to end up on YouTube, I don't want to risk YouTube taking it down for copyright infringement. So I figured let's just play it safe. But both Devil's Pie and the charade, which we're going to talk about later, they're easily found online. When I was writing this conversation, actually, I wanted it to be more of a conversation, which is why I invited Britt to join me with this. I titled this talk Singing Survival, because even when African Americans are successful or working to be successful, we are many times trying to protect ourselves as we rise through the ranks and we're trying to break through. Devil's Pie expresses uncertainty and defiance concurrently. To flip the sentiment of that very famous Rolling Stones song, it's when you get what you want, but it may not be what you really need. D'Angelo was writing specifically about the music industry, which has a not great history when it comes to treating Black artists with dignity and paying them fairly. I'm sorry, somebody is talking. I see. I don't know if they realize I can hear them. I don't know if anyone else can.
Maybe if
everyone can that person
go on mute for right now, just to.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Britt. As I was saying, D'Angelo was writing specifically about the music industry, and it does not have a great history when it comes to treating Black artists with dignity or paying them fairly. At one point, D'Angelo even talked about Devil's Pie in the vein of what a chain gang would be singing as they work in the fields. I believe that Devil's Pie resonates beyond the world of the entertainment industry, whether it's a Black person achieving in corporate America, higher education, or the straight up street hustle. There is always a need to protect your soul in the process. So when D'Angelo was singing in Devil's Pie, that first verse, and I'll quote a little bit of it: "Who am I to justify all the evil in our eye, when I myself feel the high of all that I despise? Behind the jail or in the grave, I have to lay in this bed I made." D'Angelo is musing on the interlocking of industry, capitalism, society, and his place within all of that. Where does he fit in this tableau of being chosen? On one hand, you know, has this lucrative recording contract. He's this rising star in the music industry, getting all this critical acclaim, but at the same time not belonging. Not belonging in the industry and not belonging in this country as an African American man. I'm going to read a brief excerpt from Voodoo. You were also sent a few pages from the chapter that deals with Devil's Pie, which is called The Means of Survival. The 2 paragraphs I'm going to read is not part of what I sent, but I felt that it's a good jump. It's a good way to continue this thought process of what Black masculinity means in the context of the time then and the time now. The second cut on Voodoo, Devil's Pie, segues from D'Angelo being brash to being burdened. It is a testimonial from a musical artist who embraces a genre that extols materialism. Devil's Pie draws a line in the sand, pushing back against what Questlove describes as a, quote, money-hungry, jiggified state of the world, and how the devil will destroy those who will sell their souls to him. The track can also be adopted as a rebuke against underpaying corporate bosses, a corrupt criminal justice system, schools that fail to educate, and a lack of resolution of a country founded on stolen land, erected by stolen bodies and exploited labor. Pressure brought about by race, class, and limited legal opportunities for Black men to be prosperous are key ingredients for a devil's pie. Track 2 from Voodoo easily could have been the personal theme song for a morally centered Bigger Thomas. Now, I'm sure the vast majority of you know who Bigger Thomas is. For those of you who don't, he is the main character, the anti-hero, if you will, of Richard Wright's classic novel, Native Son. 20 years after the release of Devil's Pie and Voodoo, I feel that that analysis holds up, especially in light of the economic chaos we find ourselves in right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the political and cultural reckoning that arose after the murders of African Americans, including Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, and George Floyd in Minnesota. Once again, Black men and women find themselves in a super vulnerable place with a federal government in particular that doesn't even pretend to give a damn about us. I wrote in the book that D'Angelo masterfully expresses the complexities of Black masculinity on the album, and that I feel that Devil's Pie is the best example of that nuanced complication of being a then 20-something African-American man who was a rising star in his field. I called it, quote, the anchor song that represents the main artery of emotions, energy, and creative conflict of D'Angelo and his contributors. So, hey, Britt, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this analysis and how you feel about Devil's Pie.
I feel like, looking back on it, D'Angelo was very aware of what the industry was like, and sort of the state that he, was in. But I think, the song is also in some way sort of a, what's the word? Almost like a kind of premonition of what was going to continue to happen to him. And, I think when he wrote Devil's Pie, he was already experiencing it, but not to the same degree that sort of developed after the success of Voodoo in particular, to such a degree that, he really took a really significant step away from the public eye, from, making and releasing music, things like that. In the 20 years since the album has come out, it feels like his observations have in some ways gotten worse. And I think that it was sort of, kind of thinking about the most recent sort of Black Lives Matter uprisings, that I think this was finally like a moment where at least like young people were kind of, ready to sort of tear apart the notion that, certain trappings of like capitalism are, ways in which people could escape, things, and saying like, no, we can actually sort of see the repercussions of this and how it continues to play out. You have to actually sort of, give us justice, see us as human beings, rather than just people to exploit. So, yeah, that's what I kind of think, that, in those 20 years that things haven't necessarily gotten better. They have instead maybe gotten worse, or they've just, it's become more extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I was sort of thinking through this because, we have these sort of ebbs and flows as far as like what does success mean as a country, but also particularly for Black folks, because when the album came out, Clinton was still president, Bill Clinton was still president. Then we get Bush, and then we get the Iraq War, and then we get the mortgage crisis. And so this whole, things sort of exploded, even though, things just exploded that, once again, where Black and brown people were hurt, specifically. And then, and then we get the first Black president. So in that sense, you think, maybe this Devil's Pie isn't a thing. Or maybe, I don't want to say, because obviously the election of Obama did not eradicate racism, but it gave us hope. It gave us an idea of what America could be, what America should be, and again, where we fit in with that. And it's like, well, if we can take what I would argue is our rightful place in the White House, maybe things aren't good, maybe we're finally making those steps that our, generations before us fought and died for, and we can sort of see the other side, you know what I'm saying? I mean, see like what have that thing that, the basically have the 40 acres and a mule, but more than that, like everything that we should have gotten from jump, and that maybe this is finally the turning point. Then of course 2016 happens, Donald Trump happens, and now, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I could stand here, I could sit here all day and talk about what a clusterfuck the world is right now. And obviously it's not just for African Americans, for basically everybody. But yeah, I think, what he's singing about in the song, I think a lot of us are asking right now, like, where is my slice? And, is it enough? And I mean, and it just, yeah, I mean, I think he was very I agree with you that I think he was prescient about a lot of things as far as his own life and his own career. And I do write about that in the book, about the downward spiral he went down after Voodoo came out. Although a lot of that I think was almost directly tied to the Untitled video, right, and not being prepared for that level of stardom, being a sex symbol. He just was not, D'Angelo was not prepared for that. He's like, look, I just want to make music. This is not what I signed up for. Mm-hmm. And again, even that was probably because, yeah, you want to be famous, you want to make money, but then you don't necessarily get to pick and choose all of it. You're going to get the whole pie. And when he got it, he was like, oh, wait, can I take that part out? And he wasn't prepared for it. So, but I think also culturally and politically, I think it said a lot, because literally look at what's happening right now. And actually, this is a great segue, because as I was thinking about this, in addition to Native Son, Devil's Pie, particularly now, also makes me think of James Baldwin, a visionary that has been referenced and quoted a lot these days. Yeah. So I wanted to play this, it's a slightly over 1 minute clip from an interview James Baldwin did in 1963, when he's talking about not having a response for a young teenage Black boy who told him, quote, "I got no country, I got no flag," end quote. So Eric, if you could play that clip. There is no sound.
I believe it's still on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. I forgot to unmute myself, which is apparently part of the share screen process. Live and learn. Okay, ready, set, here we go again. My apologies.
A boy last week, he was 16, in San Francisco, told me on television. Thank God we got him to talk. Maybe somebody will start to listen. He said, "I got no country, I've got no flag." But he's only 16 years old. And I couldn't say you do. I don't have any evidence to prove that he does. They were tearing down his house because San Francisco is engaging, as most northern cities now are engaged, in something called urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact. Now we're talking about human beings. There's not such a thing as a monolithic wall or some abstraction called the Negro problem. These Negro boys and girls who at 16 and 17 don't believe the country means anything that it says, don't feel they have any place here on the basis of the performance of the entire country.
Now, Jim,
No, am I exaggerating?
no, I certainly could not say that you're exaggerating.
Just want to make sure I'm still, yeah, I mean, that clip to me, I mean, that interview happened almost 60 years ago. And it could have been recorded yesterday. We're having those same conversations about, does does this country, the United States, that was built by and with the sacrifices, particularly of African Americans, you know, are we a part of that? Does that belong to us? And, you know, I think, you know, particularly with what's happening with Trump and what's happening with this sort of, not that white supremacy ever went away, but this new uprising of white supremacy, of white terror that has been bubbling up to the surface and is really coming to a head in 2020, you know, slamming right against the pandemic. I think, you know, those are questions that have to be answered once and for all and have to be rectified. So, Britt, would you like to pick up from that?
I mean, I guess based on, like, you know, the Baldwin clip that you selected and the song itself, you know, to me, I think the underlying theme is that not just that, you know, things aren't changing, but that, not just that, you know, the same patterns are being repeated over and over again, but things aren't changing, and there are the same sort of observations that are kind of playing out generation across generation as it relates to the, you know, exploitation of Black people in America, and yet, you know, still kind of holding on to a desire to, you know, to have more, to see more, to gain something for yourself, right? That's, you know, that was something that I kind of took away from Devil's Pie in particular, in that, you know, how do you reconcile both knowing and understanding what the system is like specifically, and yet also knowing that you have to somehow kind of play into it to survive, and also sometimes you can derive personal pleasure from the gains that you, you know, can acquire by taking part in that system as well. It's a really, you know, complicated thing to grapple with mentally, and something that it's really interesting to know that D'Angelo was grappling with that well before it became the sort of significant issue that it did become, you know, in the decade after Voodoo was first released. And then also sort of as a follow-up kind of thought to that is, how do you prepare artists for that? How do you sort of explain what that situation is? Because as an artist, you're just trying to get your work out there, just trying to make, you know, your work. We have perceptions of what success means from the outside, and not necessarily what it actually encompasses once you're, you know, a part of that, you know, or are feeling that success. So in some ways, Devil's Pie is almost like a warning, and yeah, one that,
yes,
you know, some artists take to heart, and others don't, and they unfortunately have to learn the bad way. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking of it, you know, that it continues to be, that it'll continue to be relevant as long as artists, Black artists in particular, are being exploited in this way, as long as they have to, you know, really just being in many ways, just being a part of the music industry sort of forces you as a Black artist to grapple with these things. There's no real escape from it. And sort of deciding for yourself how much you can take, what you can take, what are the sacrifices that you have to allow in order to have some peace of mind or to gain some sort of control. Yeah, it's go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I mean, it's layered. you know, and I think you hit on all of those points. And actually, and I mean, I feel weird, like sort of, you know, mentioning my book every 5 minutes, but in my book, no, it's sort of why I'm here, right? No, but I did interview D'Angelo's manager, Alan Leeds, for the book, and he was his tour manager, and he didn't know him while he was recording Voodoo. He came on as D'Angelo's tour manager for the Voodoo tour in 2000, but and then took over at the time as his co-manager, and now he's his solo manager. And he said that when we talked about being, particularly Black artists being prepared for the industry, for success, what does that mean? And what is, you know, will they lose their pound? Will a pound of flesh be taken from them? And I think, you know, people talk about sort of the glamour of the entertainment industry, but not the dark side. And Alan Lee said that he did not, nor did Dominique Trenier, his former manager who's now passed away, that they did not prepare him for what happened when Voodoo came out. But again, a lot of that tied into the massive success from the Untitled video, which of course most artists would want that level of, particularly now in a social media driven, you know, trending, you know, going viral world. I mean, Untitled did that before the internet, right. You know, and it's like a lot of people they crave that level of attention, you know, being that center of discussion, particularly among your community. People live for, I mean, particularly younger generations, I mean, they would be like, yes, this is exactly what I want. But again, be careful what you wish for because you might get it. And D'Angelo was not prepared for just that zeitgeist, to be the zeitgeist. He just was not ready for it. And from an industry standpoint, the video was brilliant and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But D'Angelo, in a way, was sort of he took the bullet for it on a certain level. It's like, yeah, you got the success, but again, that was the part of the pie he didn't want. And it's, you know, and I don't know how I think you can prepare people you can try to prepare people, but I think you got to be able to ride with that, or you can't. I mean, it can. And I think the other thing about D'Angelo in particular, he's a very shy guy. He's extremely shy, very, you know, emotional, at least from what I did not interview him for the book. I don't know him personally, but just everything I've read about him and know about him, it's not really a secret that he's super shy. So I think, and that's a lot of performers, which is why when they blow up and people are like, why don't you give me attention? When people get mad on Twitter when their fave doesn't respond to them on Twitter, and it's like, they have their own lives. They're not here to talk to you 24/7. That's like expected now. So in a way, D'Angelo predicted that too. That sort of, you know, why are you trying to take all this from me when I just want to live my life and be creative? But that's like the standard. I mean, people literally expect that now. So, I've had conversations with people, like, particularly with Untitled, like the video, like I can't even imagine what that would have been like if it had come out today. Like just the level of, I mean, on one hand, you don't have MTV doesn't really play music videos anymore. So it's not on that level, but just, it totally would, I mean, it would have destroyed the internet. It would have destroyed Twitter. It would have destroyed, you know, people would have been like, what? I mean, sort of the way This Is America, like, broke Twitter. You know, like Untitled would have just annihilated Twitter. Like Twitter would have been like when Michael Jackson died. And it just broke. Like, it's like, we just shut down. There's nothing here. Just go do something else because we can no longer function. And actually, this is a great segue because I was also thinking, as preparing for today, you know, I was thinking about doing research, and I came across, and I'm an old, and I hate that term, but I mean, I think. I don't know how many other olds are out there, but, you know, particularly Gen Xers are going to remember this. There's a line called, there's like a saying that says, blah, blah, blah is as American as baseball hot dogs and apple pie. And in the 70s in particular, because that was part of a very popular Chevrolet jingle. And that just was everywhere. And that phrase really defined Americana. And I say that with air quotes intentionally. And apple pie, who doesn't like apple pie? Although actually I don't, but that's another conversation. But apple pie, it tastes great. It smells great. It's filling, and it triggers all those senses in a good and even patriotic way. I mean, we have July 4th coming up. And I'm sure a whole bunch of people across the country are like, bet we got to have our apple pie ready. But if you think about it, particularly in context of the American dream, again in air quotes, African Americans were excluded from that intentionally. So going back to Devil's Pie specifically, I mean, D'Angelo created these great metaphors, both micro and macro. Macro is the devil's pie, and which is what Black America has been forced to eat. That's the default. That's what we're stuck with. Apple pie is absent from our menu. The micro is the slice of of the devil's pie, and positing what is the better choice. Do I eat this rancid slice of devil's pie, or do I eat no slice at all and possibly starve? And again, I mean, how do you answer that question? Is there an answer to that question? It depends on who you are and where you are. And I mean, again, D'Angelo, I mean, that he was putting that out there, like, and again, also for himself, not just for, I mean, what I love about the song is that he doesn't take himself off the hook. He's talking about himself as much as he's talking about, whoever's listening and whoever, particularly other African-American men saying, where do I think of Paula Giddings and the title of her book, Where and When I Enter, I mean, where do I enter? Where do I fit? And I think talking, about this devil's pie is the perfect example of trying to, do I have my pie and eat it too? And I mean, and there is no simple answer to that. I didn't know was there anything else you wanted to add, Britt? Because I was going to move on to the charade.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, just in reflection of that, it's easier to make the choice when you're outside of understanding the full scope of what the choices are. When you haven't experienced it and you've only experienced, as you said, having no pie at all, it's easy to see, a slice of it as being, potentially good or beneficial, but also I think of, and we've kind of, touched on this already, but, D'Angelo was aware of the exploitation that came with being part of the music industry. But it's not just like the scope of exploitation, but also the amount of exploitation, I should say, but it's the scope of it, the types of it. There's people exploiting you for money, for your music, but also, he then became exploited because of his physical body, right? So there was essentially no escape. It was everything all at once. And I think that's definitely something that he couldn't have ever predicted before. We're, obviously, his first album, he was a sex symbol. He was, all these things, but he wasn't to the degree of what he became after Voodoo. And he also, had not, necessarily really kind of crossed over to like kind of white America in that way. And, like he wasn't, once Untitled starts getting played on like TRL, like it's different, right? Things change, right? So it's a whole other level. And,
that was the point of the video. I mean, that's exactly what the point of the video. So it worked. They were trying to get D'Angelo to cross over and be a superstar. That was exactly. But here you go. Again, here's everything you want. And you're like, wait, but do I want this? What? It was. Anyway, it's in the book. I mean, I have a whole chapter about the video. It's deep.
It's a great book, everyone, by the way. So I just want to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Britt. I appreciate that. So I know we're starting to run out of time, so I want to move on to the charade, which is not on Voodoo. It's from D'Angelo's third album, Black Messiah. The charade is arguably D'Angelo's most political song to date. definitely a clear progression from Devil's Pie and the Voodoo album overall. Devil's Pie expresses the emotional tightrope, and we were just talking about this, that, you know, that D'Angelo is walking as he's balancing fame, success, and protecting his artistry. And again, you know, not taking himself off the hook, downing his own integrity at times. Meanwhile, the charade is pure anger at the killing of innocent Black boys and men. And to put that in further context, when the song and album came out in 2014, D'Angelo was then in his 40s and had a son close to the age of when Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown died. And there's also a clear musical shift. Devil's Pie and Voodoo overall had a strong hip hop influence. Again, DJ Premier was the co-writer and co-producer of Devil's Pie. Also, an uncredited inspiration and source was the late Jay Dilla from Slum Village. Whereas the charade and, again, Black Messiah definitely was more rock oriented. I mean, I don't know if any of you have seen D'Angelo perform the charade. And if you haven't, there's a great performance from Saturday Night Live. It was early 2015. It is on YouTube. Definitely seek that out. It's an amazing performance. And it's basically, I mean, the charade is basically a rock anthem. And that shows D'Angelo's evolution, obviously as a man, growing older, you know, having children, but also, you know, as a man that, as young Michael Archer in Virginia, he didn't really grow up listening to a lot of rock music. He didn't really embrace that until he got older. His two big pillars musically as a younger person was R&B and gospel. He definitely listened to some jazz as well, but, you know, I mean, you can hear it particularly in Brown Sugar. I mean, it's this R&B and gospel are, you know, his alpha and omega, basically. So he's definitely, you know, again, evolving as an artist, which is what I personally feel that all artists should do. And that's one of the things that he pushes back on as far as the industry, is wanting to be in a box. And that include that neo soul box that his former manager, a term that his former manager, Kadar Massenberg, came up with. Now he's like, look, fuck neo soul, excuse my language. He doesn't care about that. He's an artist. He just wants to make music. If you want to call it neo soul, that's your business. To him, it's like, it's Black music. And that incorporates, and also embracing, because I think a lot of times, particularly with us, we invented rock music. Black people invented rock music. And I know at least with me growing up, there were a lot of people sort of pushing back on that, like, well, that's white music. That doesn't really belong to us. And it's like, no, it does. And and that's why it's great for an artist like D'Angelo to say, yeah, it rock, R&B, hip hop, gospel, jazz, African and Caribbean music, all of that is part of his palette, as it should be. And in both Voodoo and Black Messiah, D'Angelo intertwines vulnerability and pride, a combination of emotions that frankly can trip up some Black men. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I do feel that hip hop in particular, as a dominant cultural force, has in music, has made it that much harder for Black men to process and express that duality. Britt, you may have thoughts on that, and we can talk about that when, later. And also, I'd be happy to discuss that in the Q&A if we have time, because I understand that, that is my opinion. Devil's Pie is D'Angelo oscillating with what it means to be a Black man and an artist, whereas the charade is him disgusted at how his Blackness and his maleness, what he loves and values so much, makes him and others like him targeted by police and possibly killed, And obviously this is even more urgent in light of the recent police violence, particularly with the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, opening up the floodgates for the massive Black Lives Matter demonstrations that have occurred all over the world. So, Britt, anything else you want to say, particularly about the charade, or anything else we talked about?
Not at this moment, no. I think we have like 15 minutes left.
Yeah, timed that well. So yeah, I guess we'll open it up to Q&A now. And obviously, if, if there's something comes to mind, I mean, obviously, jump
Just
on in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
That's great. Thank you, Britt. And Faith and Kim is going to take over conducting the Q&A now, and she'll field questions to you.
Great.
All right. Hi, I hope everyone can hear me okay. So we have time, so don't worry if it goes a little bit over, it's okay. So we have some questions, and I'd like to ask actually the people who put the questions in the chat to read your own questions. We kind of feel like this makes it feel a little more like we're all together in person. So Gail Wald had a question first. I don't know, Gail, if you feel like Faith addressed everything, or if you want to ask more.
Faith. Hey, I mean, I could tie this on to Anne's question. I was just gonna want to give Faith the floor to talk about the Untitled video, and also if you scroll down or in the chat, I can also read Anne's, because I was just prompting about Anne. I mean, you can also read yours. But Anne asked a follow-up kind of about the video and about
Sorry,
sexuality.
I'm fangirling right now. Sorry, go ahead.
And why don't you take yours over too?
Oh, wait, am I reading it or are you reading it? Okay, well.
You read yours.
Okay, Gail brought up the Untitled video, which of course is this, which you actually talked about very eloquently, Faith. And I was thinking about that in context of something that's often been talked about with D'Angelo, which is the tension around him being defined as a sex symbol, not only, I think, through the Untitled video. I actually think that was going on before that video, and I may have even contributed to it, profiling him for Spin magazine, because I definitely wrote about his sexiness, which was strong, and still is. But what I was thinking about is, historically, for male performers in general, and Black male performers in specific, there's a tension between being a political artist and being not just a sex symbol, but even an artist expressing intimacy or the personal. And, one obvious example would be Marvin Gaye, who kind of, swings on this pendulum between those two poles. I also think of Stevie Wonder, who in a way, was not a conventional sex symbol, you might argue, but at the same time would express very tender personal emotions in certain songs. And in fact, you could see maybe when he does Secret Life of Plants, which is an ambient record, but also is sort of this very personal project, people scorn him and it's not considered as important or whatever as his, more political uprising work of his earlier albums. And then, in the 80s, this might even become more extreme. I don't know. There is Prince, who kind of embodies both, but I wondered if you could talk about that tension in D'Angelo's career specifically, but then how it reflects or is connected to the larger issue of America not allowing our, Black men who are in the public eye to be both political and personal or sexual.
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna try and think of a short. I don't want to ramble. First of all, I just want to say very quickly, and I've been a big fan of your work for a long time. You are the gold standard of music journalism, and actually, you wrote a thing for the Village Voice. You were the reason I got into Girls Against Boys, which is a great techno punk band out of DC. For those of you who are not familiar with them, so I just wanted to just let you know that.
Thank you.
I adore you. So just wanted to say that. That's why I was like, oh my God, Ann Power. Sorry, I don't usually do that, but I was like, I actually respect you. Yes. No, but to answer and also Gail Wald, again, the reason I wrote the Voodoo book, yay, thank you. So at some point we'll meet in person. To answer your question, and again, that's a lot. I mean, I think, Black men in particular, I think, that's something that they just go, you know what, I'm going to express myself, and I'm not going to limit, at least back in the day, I'm not going to limit myself to what people expect of me and what is the standard, or even like the stereotype is. And I mean, and you mentioned, Marvin Gaye, Prince, Stevie Wonder, all big influences for D'Angelo. So, you know, he was just basically following their lead and continuing it. And I do think, I mean, I think, you know, the industry was different. And, you know, again, I don't want to sound, oh, she's an old, but I mean, and just sort of, but the industry was different then. And I think there was more of a, you know, an elasticity that you could have as an artist. You didn't have to sort of fit into this, you know, very, you know, tight, you know, box, you know? I mean, I think people were more open to different kinds of music, different kinds of sounds, different kinds of expressions. It wasn't this, you must do X. I mean, I think that definitely grew in the 80s. I think in the end, the argument could be made whether MTV contributed to that, and just radio also, I think, well, what it was is deregulation of radio stations in particular, where it's like, okay, we have to be financially profitable and we have to cater to whatever that, you know, demographic is, or that, you know, that genre that will make us the most money in ad sales. So I think with the 80s, you know, thanks Reagan, and deregulation, I think definitely radio stations became more and more programmed, more and more, you got to do this and your songs have to do that. And so that trickled down to the record industry, that trickled down to the artists, because, you know, again, if you're just trying to sell records versus trying to really express yourself, there wasn't a lot of room. Because again, you know, we grew up with album cuts, you know, like you didn't necessarily have just the hit songs being played on radio. Whereas now, you know, everything is you know, particularly with Spotify and all, everything is super tailored to what you're supposed, you know, what that genre is and what you're supposed to sound like. And I mean, there's definitely artists trying to sort of, you know, particularly Black male artists trying to blow up that, you know, sort of very tight expectation. I mean, I think of Moses Sumney, I think of Frank Ocean. I mean, there's definitely, you know, Sempha. There are definitely artists now who I would say are trying to pick up where D'Angelo, not that D'Angelo's gone away, but, you know, D'Angelo, Marvin Gaye, Prince, et cetera, left off, you know, and trying to continue with that. I think it's harder now. And I think, you know, they have like a cult followings. I just think it's harder to be a mass success. And that comes back to Untitled. I'm gonna try and wrap this up. Again, the point of that video was to blow up D'Angelo to a larger audience. And I think Black women were already, sort of what you were saying, Ann, felt like D'Angelo was, you know, yes, I want him, he's sexy, he's great, blah, blah, blah. We were already there. I think with Untitled, they were trying to break out of, and I'm not saying this pejoratively, the Black music ghetto. They wanted Untitled and the Voodoo, Untitled song and Voodoo in general to be a hit in the work. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard chart, the album. So, and they wanted, and people were talking about it. I mean, there was there was an article in the Times about it. It had all these different parody videos made about it. I mean, for a good like 4 to 6 months in 2000 and even late 99, it just seemed like everywhere I went, that's all people, particularly Black women, were talking about, where the Untitled video. So again, it's like, and I think D'Angelo, you know, and that's what triggered people about the video, because he was singing to a woman. It was very clear. This was not just, you know, LL Cool J with his shirt off, DMX with his shirt off, 50 Cent with his shirt off. This was D'Angelo, presumably naked, although he wasn't, singing to, basically serenading a woman. And a lot of dudes could not, women lost their shit. Women were like, yes, Jesus, thank you. Because a lot of, you know, so many music videos were so misogynist, and, you know, women in, you know, bikinis in the hot tub, Tawny Katan dancing on a car in a Whitesnake video, whatever. You know, it was geared towards men and for the male gaze. And this was like one of the very few videos where you're like, oh, this is for me. Yay, you know, for us as women, and particularly Black women, it was just like, finally someone singing to me. And and again, then that meant that, you know, one, a lot of men just couldn't deal because they were just like, what do you mean this is for you? You don't get to have this. And then, but then a lot of women, and having seen D'Angelo on the Voodoo tour, I saw women throwing their panties on stage, yelling, take it off, trying to rip his clothes. I mean, and even I was sort of like, guys, can you chill? Yeah, it's like, so that, you know, and he was objectified. Now, a lot of women would be like, well, so what? Women are objectified all the time. But he felt very sensitive to that. And, you know, whereas even some men, and again, Alan Leeds told me this, you know, and I quoted it in the book, saying that he thought, well, you're a guy, of course he's going to love the fact that women want to sleep with him. He's going to love that attention, you know? And so even he sort of miscalibrated that, because he thought, oh yeah, well, D'Angelo's going to be a sex symbol and he's going to have so much fun. And it didn't work out that way. But then that was partly our fault as women. I mean, we have to take responsibility. We objectified him, and he wasn't down, and that, so we have to take responsibility for that as well.
Thank you for that. I totally. I'll just say one more thing. I think it's interesting when you get to the charade. He's has such a different role in the band and on stage. It's like it's decentered. You know what I mean? He's not sharing that space so much. And I wondered if you thought that was a response to, you know, I don't want to be like, I will never go anywhere near you know.
Wow, that's a good way to put it, like decentered. That, I think you're right. Because definitely, you know, because I remember, you know, having seen that tour, I remember that, you know, he's sort of obviously he's front and center, but he's not, everybody's around him as opposed to behind him. I mean, obviously some of the band members are behind him, but like, you know, he's got, you know, Jesse Johnson on one side, he's got his backup singers on the other side, he's got, so it definitely wasn't, I'm D'Angelo, I'm the center of this. And I mean, and also just even that it was D'Angelo in the vanguard, you know, as opposed to just D'Angelo, you know, and that he felt it was important to tack and the vanguard on that to, you know, give his band more shine. So that's a really interesting point that you bring up. I think you're probably right. That was sort of a way for him to sort of, and he definitely doesn't even remotely get as naked, you know, like, I remember on the Voodoo tour, he would take his shirt off and whatever, but obviously, you know, again, 20 years ago, he didn't have the same body. So he probably didn't feel comfortable doing that anyway. But yeah, definitely, I think he was sort of trying to play down the title, Black Messiah. I mean, even that was like tongue in cheek, even though I think some people didn't get it, but he was trying to play all that down to say, like, look, I'm an artist and I want to express myself, but I am not the Messiah. I am not your boyfriend. I am not, you know, I am not the sex symbol of your dreams. You need to chill. And yeah, I think short answer, yes, I concur with your take on that.
Okay. So we have another question from Antonia Randolph. Do you want to read your question?
Sure. Thank you so much for giving us some background about charade and the Devil's Pie. I was thinking about something I heard on, I guess it was Questlove Supreme, when Questlove was saying that D'Angelo could have been a rapper. And I was thinking about some of the more political of D'Angelo's songs, like the Devil's Pie and maybe the charade a little bit, seems influenced by political hip hop of the era that he's from, like we're from similar eras. And he didn't go the rapper route, he went the R&B artist route. But his way of thinking about Black political concerns seems really influenced by 5% Nation thinking. And, you know, did he have company there? Like, who were his contemporaries in terms of R&B artists, not hip hop artists, who would be trying to kind of work the same space? And what could he have drawn on? Was there a way to be a political artist? I mean, it speaks to kind of Anne's question, but just from the genre point of view of R&B versus hip hop, to bring up political concerns he seemed very alone in that, and that he
Right.
was drawing on not his actual holiness background, but sort of things that hip hop artists were doing, like 5% Nation, kind of thinking about politics.
Ooh, that's interesting. And I see people are throwing in names in the chat, so you probably should check that out. I mean, yeah, he actually was when he was younger. He did. First of all, he loves D'Angelo loves hip hop, and when he was younger, he was an MC for a while.
Okay.
He actually did do that. So when he was still living in Virginia, so it makes sense that he never walked away from hip hop, even though obviously, particularly with Brown Sugar, that was more of a straightforward R&B album, but he never walked away from hip hop. And I think with Voodoo, I think he actually made the intent, he was being intentional to walk towards hip hop and really embrace that. As far as I guess people of his generation, of my generation, who were sort of doing, D'Angelo, well, first of all, let me just say, D'Angelo wasn't he's never been a super political artist. I mean, in the sense of like, I think even Common is probably more political than D'Angelo is. And then I think of, oh God, there's so many, like Dead Prez, who's super political. I guess, but you're asking specifically about R&B artists. See, that's what I'm trying.
That's the interesting part, that he's an R&B artist pulling on 5% Nation stuff, and I just can't think of that happening otherwise.
Right, and he specifically cites like the 5%. It's funny you mentioned 5% Nation, because he cites that specifically in Devil's Pie. Right. With 85 Dumb and Blind, there can be no compromise. Right. That comes from 5% Nation ideology. Is
he a failed hip hop artist that sings?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. I think he never. I wouldn't say that at all. I think he's a multifaceted artist that does. And see, and I get, please don't take offense to this. This is sort of what I was talking about before, as far as wanting people to fit into a certain paradigm and into a certain box. And I think D'Angelo, even though he's not a rapper, he is a hip hop artist. I mean, he embraced hip hop is the fabric of the music that he does, just like jazz, just like R&B, just like gospel, just like rock, just like, what I'm saying? It's not an either or. And I think, and I like the subtlety. I like that it's not like, I am hip hop, what I'm saying? I mean, that to me is sort of attractive. And I'm not, let me be transparent. I am not a hip hop head. I mean, there are definitely some hip hop artists and hip hop songs that I like, but I would not say I am a hip hop head. There may be people on here who are and can probably speak to this way better than I can. But I do feel that, I think he just is trying to, again, he's not trying to be defined. He's just trying to express himself in the different facets of himself, which again, includes his vulnerability, includes his emotions. It's not just about, I'm hard, I'm trying to get paid, I'm trying to kill a nigga, I'm trying to blood. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's all interwoven into who he is, who he is as Michael Archer and who he is as D'Angelo. So, and I think frankly, also because he's just, well, again, I guess, that's technically here. I'm going to say Questlove is maybe the obvious answer to your question. But again, if you're thinking of a singing, although someone said Erica, which, I concur with that. Erica, obviously Lauryn Hill, but Lauryn Hill literally put out one album. You're just like, so it's all, I guess off that one album, Miseducation. Yeah. I'm sure there are some that will come to mind after I get off of this, after I finish this, and I'll be like, damn it, I didn't think of X. But I was going to say Michael Franti from the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy and Spearhead, because he's sort of a singer, sort of rapper, but more of a singer. So I would think him. And again, he has that, rock, jazz, hip hop, sort of mix. I'm just trying to. I'm sure there's probably somebody.
Yeah, I'll look
Someone
at the
said
chat.
Bilal, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. Yeah, I'd have to think that. Yeah, Michael Franti's the only one that comes like as far as like a singer that also is obviously a hip hop artist. Maybe Saul Williams, although he's more of a poet. It's just the thing. I'm just trying to think of someone who's known more as a singer. And Michael Franti is the only one that I can think of his generation that's on point that way. There may be others, and they're just not coming to mind right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, but someone said Anderson .Paak, but I'm talking about Gen X. Like she specifically said right. I mean, that was your question of like who were his peers coming up at around the same time as him, right? Yeah. I love Anderson .Paak, by the way. Anderson .Paak's amazing, but
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have one final question. Sean Peterson, do you want to read your question?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Faith, for writing this book and for everybody who put this together today. I was just, and thank you for your thinking on all these topics too, but I have sort of more of a mundane question about your research into the album production. I'm just really curious. It took them about 3 years to record the album, working at Electric Lady a lot of the time. I'm just wondering if you know how the budget allowed for this, or if people were donating their time. Questlove was there all the time, and a bunch of people contributed. Russ Elevato was there all the time. How was that possible?
Virgin Records was very generous, let's just say that. And they were not happy at the end because I think they felt like the album costs more than it should have. Like he went way over budget and over time. I mean, it took them like 3.5 years to finish the album. And they were sort of like, where's the album already? Can we put it out? Russell Lovato says he estimated that the album cost, and this is in late 1990 dollars, that it cost $1.5 million to make. And I think the book said, I think for 2019 dollars, that would be $2.3 million. So that's part of it, is that Virgin Records wrote a check. And sort of indulged D'Angelo to make this album and do it the way he wanted to do it. And I think begrudgingly, frankly, because I know there was pressure on Russell Lovato to get D'Angelo to finish. I know they were also recording. I mean, part of why Russell Lovato and Questlove and a lot of other people were just there all the time is that they were also working on other albums. Like I know, like Questlove and the Roots, like they recorded Things Fall Apart at Electric Lady while D'Angelo was working on Voodoo, and Elevato mixed a whole bunch of albums at Electric Lady, including Mama's Gun by Erykah Badu, Like Water for Chocolate for Common, Bilal's debut album, Firstborn Second. So I think it was, so they weren't there exclusively for Voodoo, but I think, that was the draw, I think, on a certain level was, because D'Angelo, particularly then, like he was the guy. Everybody was like, what is D'Angelo doing? When is his new album coming out? So a lot of people wanted to be in his orbit, in addition to the core people he worked with. So I think so the short answer, Virgin Records spent a lot of money on that album. And they were working on other, and not just Questlove and Lovato, but also Pino Palladino, who played bass, Roy Hargrove, who did horns, James Poyser, keyboards. They were working on other projects while working on Voodoo. Like they would literally go from studio to studio, and sometimes to sit in, but to actually work on stuff. So there were other projects going on as well that I'm assuming they got paid for as well. So I don't know if it was exclusively the largesse of Virgin, but it helps when you have, other labels paying for other projects that were being made at Electric Lady at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's good to hear Russ's estimation of what it cost. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Faith and to Britt and to all of you for coming. Just wanted to remind you that next week, R.J. Smith will be here talking about his book in progress, You Never Can Tell, Chuck Berry in Our Life and Times. And we hope to see all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Oh, is this up there? Here we go.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful. This was great.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Be safe. Have a good 4th.
You too. Love you.
Oh, bye, Mom. Love you too.